One of my colleagues told me how his wife took his child away from him. He didn't say it dramatically. No shaking voice, no tears, just a flat, almost mechanical tone, like he was reading a line from a script he had repeated too many times. That's what caught my attention. Pain that deep doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just sits there. We were at work when he told me. Same break room, same cheap coffee, same dull hum of routine. Nothing about that moment suggested that what I was about to hear would stay with me long after the conversation ended. He stared at his cup for a few seconds before continuing, like he was deciding whether to open a door he had kept locked for a long time. It didn't happen in a fight, he said. That's the strange part. You'd expect something explosive, raised voices, accusations, something that builds up and then collapses, but that wasn't his story. It was quiet, he added. That word lingered, quiet. He told me that morning started like any other. No signs, no warning. His child was playing in the living room, completely lost in a world that only children can understand. That kind of innocent focus that makes time disappear. The kind adults spend their whole lives trying to get back. His wife was different that morning though. Not angry, not emotional, just distant. There's something unsettling about distance in someone who used to feel close. It's like standing next to someone and realizing they're already miles away. She had a suitcase, he said. That was the moment everything shifted. Not a bag for a trip, not something temporary. A suitcase that carries decisions, final ones. He asked her where she was going. No answer, just movement. That's another thing he mentioned. How she didn't argue, didn't explain, didn't even try to justify what she was about to do. She simply acted, and sometimes actions without explanation hit harder than any words ever could. Then she said it. I'm leaving, and I'm taking him. Just like that. No build-up, no hesitation, a sentence so simple yet so destructive. It rewrote his entire reality in a matter of seconds. He told me his first reaction wasn't anger, it was confusion. Not the kind where you're trying to understand something complicated, the kind where your brain refuses to accept what's right in front of you. You don't process it, he said. You just stand there. I could see it in his eyes as he spoke. He wasn't remembering it, he was reliving it. He walked toward her slowly, not aggressively, not even urgently, just trying to close the distance between what was happening and what made sense. He asked her why. Still no answer. That silence again. It's strange how silence can be louder than shouting. It fills the room, presses against your chest, makes it hard to breathe. His child looked up at them. Children are sensitive to shifts in energy. They might not understand words, but they feel tension like a change in temperature. What's going on? The child asked. He paused when he told me that part, that question, simple, pure, and completely impossible to answer. What do you say in that moment? How do you explain something you don't even understand yourself? He said. He tried to keep his voice calm. Tried to act like everything was under control, even though nothing was. His wife walked past him. No hesitation, no looking back. That was the detail that haunted him the most. She didn't look back, he repeated, as if turning around would have changed something, as if one last glance could have softened the blow. But there was nothing. Just movement, final and irreversible. He followed her to the door, not to stop her. At least that's what he told himself. Just to understand, to get something, anything that made sense of what was happening. But some moments don't come with explanations. Some moments just happen and leave you there, trying to rebuild meaning from the pieces. He told me he remembers standing in that doorway long after she left, not chasing, not shouting, just standing, as if his body hadn't caught up with reality yet. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it was heavy, suffocating, the kind of silence that forces you to confront the fact that something irreversible has just happened. And that's the part people don't talk about. It's not just the moment someone leaves, it's the realization that they're not coming back. He looked at me after finishing that part of the story, not expecting sympathy, not looking for advice, just sharing. And for a second, I didn't know what to say, because how do you respond to something like that? How do you feel a silence that heavy? You don't. You just sit there and listen. What stayed with me was not just what he said, it was the way he said it. No bitterness in his voice, no dramatic pauses, just the exhausted tone of a man who had repeated the story so many times in his own head that the words had lost their edges. That more than anything made it harder to hear. Raw pain can be overwhelming, but pain that has settled into someone's bones feels even heavier. It means the event is no longer an incident. It has become part of who they are. He took another sip of coffee and looked through the break room window, but it was clear he wasn't seeing the parking lot outside. He was somewhere else entirely. You know what the worst part was? He asked. I didn't answer. He gave a faint nod, like he had expected silence. It wasn't the door closing, it was the hours after. That sentence landed hard. Most people imagine loss as a single dramatic moment, a final argument, a slammed door, a car disappearing down the street. But according to him, the true damage starts afterward, when the noise is gone and reality has room to settle in. He told me the apartment felt unfamiliar the moment she left. Same furniture, same walls, same light coming through the same windows. Yet nothing looked the same anymore. The place had been stripped of something invisible, something that held it together. His child's toys were still scattered across the floor. A little jacket still hung by the entrance. A cup half filled with juice was still sitting on the kitchen table. Every object became evidence that life had existed just minutes earlier in one form, and now it existed in another. That's the cruelty of sudden absence. The world does not rearrange itself to match your pain. Everything stays where it was, and you are left to deal with the contrast. He said he walked from room to room without purpose. Bedroom, living room, kitchen, hallway, then back again. Not searching for anything. Just moving. Because standing still made it too real. I kept expecting to hear him, he said. That small detail hit me harder than the rest. A laugh from the other room, tiny footsteps on the floor, that random call children make when they want your attention for something that seems trivial to adults and yet becomes sacred the moment it's gone. He said his body was still waiting for sounds that would never come that day. He checked his phone constantly. No message, no explanation, no location, nothing that could reduce the uncertainty. There is a particular kind of torture in not knowing. When something is terrible but clear, at least the mind has a shape to hold. Uncertainty has no edges, it stretches in every direction. He called her once, no answer. Twice, straight to voicemail. After that, he stopped calling. Not because he had given up, because he could already feel what desperation was doing to him, and he hated it. He hated how quickly a person can be forced into begging just to remain in the life they once helped build. That's another brutal truth no one prepares you for. When someone decides to leave with your child, you are not only grieving the child's absence, you are also grieving your own position, your place, your authority, your identity. In a single day, you stop feeling like a parent with a home and start feeling like a visitor in the memory of your own life. He told me he sat on the edge of the bed sometime in the afternoon and stared at the wall for what felt like hours, not crying, not moving, just staring. People often romanticize strength as action, fighting back, making plans, taking control, but sometimes strength is far less glamorous. Sometimes strength is simply enduring a moment that seems impossible to survive. He said that was the first time he understood what helplessness really meant, not weakness. Helplessness, there's a difference. Weakness suggests you failed to act. Helplessness means there was nothing you could do in that moment that would undo what had already happened. As he talked, I realized he wasn't really describing a breakup, he was describing a fracture in reality. The rules he had lived by no longer applied. Love didn't protect him. Routine didn't protect him. Being a father didn't protect him. All the roles people trust to give life structure had collapsed in a single morning. Then he said something I still remember clearly. I wasn't only missing my child, he said. I was missing the version of myself that existed when he was there. That was the line that stayed with me, because loss is rarely one-dimensional. When someone is taken from your daily life, they don't leave alone. They take rituals with them, identity with them, future plans with them. The simple shape of your days disappears and you discover how much of yourself was tied to ordinary things you barely noticed. Bath time, breakfast, school drop-offs, falling asleep on the couch together after a long day. The world calls these small moments. It only calls them small until they vanish. By then the coffee in his hand had gone cold. The room around us felt strangely quiet, even though people were coming and going. Chairs moved, doors opened, someone laughed in the hallway, yet none of it seemed to enter the space between us. He leaned back and rubbed his hands together, and the strangest part, he said, was waking up the next day. He paused there, his eyes fixed somewhere far beyond the walls, because that's when I knew it was real, and that was when I understood his story wasn't about one terrible morning. It was about what comes after the world breaks, and how a man keeps breathing when the life he knew has been taken out of reach. The next day didn't bring clarity, it brought confirmation. He told me that waking up was harder than the moment she left because when it first happened, there was still a part of him that believed it might not be real, that maybe it was temporary, that maybe she would come back, that maybe there had been some misunderstanding that would resolve itself with time. But morning has a way of stripping away illusions. You open your eyes, and reality is still there, unchanged, waiting. I reached for my phone immediately, he said. That instinct, it's almost automatic, as if somewhere overnight something must have shifted. A message, a miskodo, miskol. A sign that the situation had softened, that things were moving back toward normal. Nothing. No notification, no explanation, just the same silence, now heavier because it had survived the night. He got out of bed and walked straight to his child's room. That's when it hit him differently. The room was exactly as it had been left. The bed still slightly messy. A toy on the floor, a small shirt draped over the chair. It looked like someone had stepped out for a moment and would return any second. But no one did. He stood there for a long time, not touching anything, almost like he was afraid that if he moved something, it would make the absence more permanent, as if preserving the room exactly as it was could somehow preserve the connection. That's something people rarely talk about. When you lose someone, suddenly you start holding on to details, objects, positions, smells, because they become the last physical proof that what you had was real. He eventually sat on the edge of the bed, and that's when the thoughts started to change. The first day was shock. The second day was questions, endless questions. What did I miss? Was there a moment where this could have been stopped? Did she plan this for weeks, months? Was I blind the whole time? That kind of thinking is dangerous because the mind doesn't search for truth in those moments. It searches for control. It tries to reconstruct the past, to create the illusion that the outcome could have been different, because if it could have been prevented, then maybe you weren't completely powerless. But the more he thought about it, the worse it became. Every memory started to feel suspicious. Every conversation felt like it had hidden meaning. Every silence felt like a warning he didn't understand at the time. That's the trap. When something breaks suddenly, the past stops feeling stable. It becomes something you question instead of something you trust. He told me he started replaying small moments, times when she seemed distracted, moments when she avoided certain conversations, little changes in behavior that didn't seem important at the time. Now they felt like pieces of a puzzle he should have solved earlier. I kept trying to find the exact point where everything went wrong, he said, but he never found it. Because sometimes there isn't a single moment. Sometimes things don't collapse all at once. They drift apart quietly until one day the distance is too big to cross and one person decides to leave. He finally checked his messages again later that morning. Still nothing. At that point, something shifted inside him. Not acceptance, not even understanding. Just a slow, uncomfortable realization. She wasn't coming back that day, or the next, or maybe not at all. That's when the fear changed form. It wasn't just about where they were anymore. It became about time. How long would it take before his child started adjusting to a new environment? How long before his absence became normal? How long before he stopped being part of the daily routine and became occasional? That thought scared him more than anything else. Because losing someone physically is one thing, losing your place in their life is something else entirely. I wasn't afraid of being alone, he said. I was afraid of becoming irrelevant. That word, irrelevant, it carries a quiet kind of terror, not dramatic, not explosive. Just the slow realization that life is continuing somewhere without you. He told me he started imagining things he couldn't see. His child eating breakfast somewhere else, laughing at something he wasn't there to witness, falling asleep without him saying goodnight, moments that used to belong to him, now happening out of reach. That's when the emotional pain becomes something deeper, because it's no longer about what you lost, it's about what continues without you. He tried to distract himself, cleaned the apartment, reorganized things that didn't need to be reorganized. Anything to create the feeling of movement. But no matter what he did, his mind kept returning to the same place, the door, that moment, that sentence. I'm taking him with me. It echoed again and again, not louder, just more persistent, like something that had settled into the background of his thoughts and refused to leave. He told me that was the day he understood something uncomfortable. Closure doesn't always come when something ends. Sometimes things end and you're left without answers. No explanation, no final conversation, no resolution. Just a reality you didn't choose, and the responsibility to live with it anyway. He leaned forward slightly when he said the next part, and that's when I realized, he said quietly, that I couldn't stay in that state forever. Not because he felt ready, but because time doesn't wait for readiness. Life keeps moving, whether you're prepared or not.